U.S. adds to growing list of sanctions on Russia file. In this April 28, 2015, file photo, a man walks past a Microsoft sign set up for the Microsoft Build conference at Moscone Center in San Francisco. Microsoft has uncovered new hacking attempts by Russia targeting U.S. political groups ahead of the midterm elections. The company said Tuesday, August 21, 2018, that a group tied to the Russian government created fake websites that appeared to spoof two American conservative organizations, the Hudson Institute and the International Republican Institute. 3 other fake sites were designed to look as if they belonged to the U.S. Senate. AP photo, Jeff Chu, file, Washington, AP. The Trump administration added to its growing list of sanctions against Russia on Tuesday as U.S. lawmakers urged tighter economic restrictions on Moscow, and Britain's top diplomat accused Russia's leader of pursuing policies that are making the world more dangerous. The Treasury Department announced 2 new actions against Russian targets, blacklisting 2 companies and 2 individuals suspected of trying to circumvent U.S. sanctions imposed in June in response to cyberattacks, and against 2 Russian shipping companies suspected of transferring petroleum products to North Korean vessels in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. While President Donald Trump has sought closer ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin, his administration has intensified economic pressure on Moscow over what it describes as malign Russian activity in Ukraine and Syria and Russia's attempts to disrupt Western democracies. Senior officials from the State and Treasury Departments told 2 Senate hearings Tuesday that since January 2017, 217 Russian businesspeople, officials, and private and state-run companies, including 14 banks and 20 energy firms, have been sanctioned. In addition, they recalled that the administration had expelled 60 Russian spies and closed Russia's consulates in San Francisco and Seattle. Marshall Billingsley, the Treasury Department's top terrorist financing official, acknowledged that the threat from Russia was significant and continuing, but told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that without the sanctions, their behavior would be even further off the charts. He and the State Department's top diplomat for Europe, Wes Mitchell, said Russia is feeling the impact, costing its economy tens of billions of dollars, with companies under sanctions losing a quarter of their operating revenue and having to shed employees. But the officials faced questions from skeptical lawmakers about the administration's policy toward Russia, particularly since Trump has sent conflicting messages about it. The committee's chairman, Sen. Bob Corker, R10, called Trump's comments undisciplined. Sen. Chris Murphy, D-Con, said it appeared to him as though the administration were pursuing 2 different policies, one of the president's and one of federal national security agencies. Mitchell denied that. This is the president's administration, this is his foreign policy. Although Trump himself has repeatedly cast doubt on Russia's culpability in 2016 election meddling, Mitchell and Billingsley both pointed to the Kremlin and Putin as the source. Putin wants to break apart the American Republic, not by influencing an election or 2, but by systematically inflaming the perceived fault lines that exist within our society, Mitchell said. His is a strategy of chaos for strategic effect. Treasury's Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, Sigel Mandelker, faced similar skepticism in a hearing before the Senate Banking Committee. It seems to many of us that our efforts are not effective enough, Senator Tim Scott, RSC, told her. There's so little we can show for our efforts. I'm not convinced Treasury is doing everything possible to hold Putin accountable, said Sen. Elizabeth Warren, D-Mass. It's not hard to see why Putin thinks he can interfere in our elections and get away with it. Russia denies accusations of election meddling, but suspicions of interference deepened Tuesday when Microsoft said it had uncovered new Russian hacking efforts targeting U.S. political groups before November's midterm elections. Microsoft said a group tied to the Russian government created fake websites that appeared to spoof 2 American conservative organizations, the Hudson Institute and the International Republican Institute. 3 other fake sites were designed to look as if they belonged to the U.S. Senate. Russian officials dismissed the company's claims as unfounded. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said the latest U.S. sanctions were based on malicious insinuations and hard-headed, narrow-minded and aggressive approach by the U.S. Meanwhile, Britain's Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, called on the European Union to ensure that its sanctions against Russia were comprehensive, in response to accusations Moscow poisoned a former Russian spy in Britain, using a nerve agent. He said the EU and United States should respond to Russia with one voice. Of course we must engage with Moscow, but we must also be blunt, Hunt said in a speech in Washington. Russia's foreign policy under President Putin has made the world a more dangerous place. The U.S. sanctions announced Tuesday targeted 2 companies and people suspected of trying to circumvent existing sanctions against Dive Technoservices of St. Petersburg. That company was sanctioned in June for procuring underwater equipment and diving systems for Russian government agencies, including the Federal Security Service, formerly Russia's KGB spy service. Alleges that Marina Igorovna Sareva, an import manager for Dive Technoservices, attempted to help the company circumvent U.S. sanctions through Vela Marine Limited of St. Petersburg. Treasury said another employee, Anton Alexandrovich Nagabin, also helped Dive Technoservices circumvent U.S. sanctions. The 2 companies targeted in Tuesday's action were Vela Marine and Lacno SRO, which is based in Slovakia. The sanctions freeze any assets they may have in U.S. jurisdictions and bar Americans from doing business with them. Separately, Treasury targeted Primary Maritime Logistics Co. and Gudson Shipping Co., based in the city of Vladivostok, and 6 of their vessels. Department said that earlier this year, one vessel linked to the Russian companies transferred 3,500 tons of oil to ships flying the North Korea flag. Associated Press writers Matthew Daly, Susanna George and Deb Reekman contributed to this report. Copyright 2018 The Associated Press. All rights reserved. This material may not be published, broadcast, written or redistributed.